Honorable President and Prime Minister, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, friends both here and online, all protocol observed. Good morning and welcome. I'm Sabine Alkire and I'm deeply honored to moderate this side event organized by the Government of Costa Rica with the University of Oxford's Poverty and Human Development Initiative, OPHI, and the Multidimensional Poverty Peer Network. It is a call to action on using multidimensional poverty indices to lead progress in the Sustainable Development Goals so that progress in monetary and multiple dimensions is addressed. And so speakers today will share from their experiences how MPIs are being used to guide policies, but also how they are used as leadership tools to motivate and to share the MPIs in different phases of use, from their design to the second generation. We will also hear from a state-level initiative and from the private sector. An MPI, though our discussions will speak in general global terms and country terms, starts with the individual poor person. It looks at the deprivations that he or she faces at the same time. It counts those and sums them in a weighted sum that depicts, in a sense, their poverty profile, identifies who is poor, and then uses this information platform to show the level of poverty and its composition, disaggregated by many groups, as we will hear. And I'm delighted to welcome James Foster, the co-author of that methodology here. This session has an exhilarating bill of speakers. To enable us to listen to this orchestra of ideas, the timekeeper will reach a yellow card 1 minute before the end of time and read at time. The speeches fulfill the session's length with nothing to spare. To the speakers, I greatly look forward to your insights, and I beseech you to share them succinctly. The speaker order balances protocol with practicality, and so I ask your understanding. Given our shared passion for ending poverty, I know you will offer it. For those who wish it, online translation and in-room translation is available in English and Spanish. Please look at your channels. So it is with delight that I call upon His Eminence President Carlos Alvarado, our gracious host of this event, to deliver his address.
Thank you, Sabina. Thank you, Sabina, and thank you all. Good morning, and thanks
Buenos días. Gracias.
for calling and being present in this event. I'll try to share 3 ideas, try to persuade you on them, how multidimensional measurements, and especially in poverty, change paradigms. Second, how we could change policies deeply and profoundly, but foremost, and third, how we could change the life of the most vulnerable people in the planet, in line with the SDGs, particularly with number 1. And I'm going to share a bit of what has been our path in this with Sabina and with the OPHI team, and how it really works. What I really want to know how it works is how to change the slides in the presentation. Also, oh, please, next. So this is a bit on the data we've got on Costa Rica when we started. We started this path on 2014. And before that, we were just measuring poverty by income. But what's the problem by measuring poverty only by income? That's a consequence. Income is a consequence of reality of people. So you do not really know what are the deprivation in their life, what they do not have in human capital and in other basic needs. So in 2014 we started this, and one key message is that every country requires strong and robust data set and statistical sets to make this happen. This is very important for every country to invest constantly in scientific and impartial data analysis. So from that you can see that poverty might be somehow stagnant in income in Costa Rica, but when you start measuring it through multidimensional standards, you can see there are changes in the livelihoods of people. Next, please. So the first thing we did is to develop the indicators. We came up with 5 dimensions we wanted to measure, and each one of them with 4 indicators, specific indicators reflected on the statistical data. One thing that was very beneficial in Costa Rica's case was that we had data sets that not only started with the measurement in 2015, which was the first one, but dated back to data sets which were older. So we can trace back the information until you have data that you can manage to read. So for example, the 5 dimension, housing and internet, because internet is key for human development currently. And you see the variables were like poor ceiling and floor, overcrowding on the housing, no internet use. We have the education variable, so we measure no attendance, education lag, no high school degree, low human capital, social protection, health, labor. I have to say that when we developed this, and I was very involved in this, I was Minister of Human Development at the time, we worked with each minister of each of the cabinet that had something to do with these dimensions. So the indicators were relevant for their work. But this is also good. Why? Because each indicator you can address with public policy. When you measure poverty only by income, it's everybody's fault and nobody's fault, right? When you measure poverty multidimensional through specific indicators, you have a Ministry of Housing, you have a Ministry of Science and Technology, a Ministry of Health, a Ministry of Labor, you have a Ministry of Education. So those indicators are their indicators as well. And this can allow you to have clear departing points, and you can see your progress through time in the different variables. Also, one relevant thing that derives from this, you can budget specifically for each dimension. And you can not only budget, but measure improvement and accomplish, to see if you can accomplish goals. Another note is, this index working through each country should be developed nationally or locally, because the variables are not variables that you just have to be the same all around the world. For some countries, depending on their stage of development, some variables might be relevant, others not. For example, a discussion in Costa Rica, access to electricity. Access to electricity was not a variable relevant for us, because at the time we had more than 99% of access in households. So it was not important to measure that. But then it was important to measure other things as childcare or taking care of the elderly. So that's what we developed with OPHI. We launched it in 2015 and has been not only groundbreaking, but it has changed the paradigm in which we see poverty in Costa Rica, which is a constant struggle. We have started changing policies to address it, and that's a process, but we have started to make that again. And now what we are most focused is on changing the lives of people directly. So in this part, I'm going to address what we call a second generation part of multidimensional, and this is something we just recently we've been going through with OPHI, and we want to share today briefly. So how we managed to have the data at the beginning, it was statistical data. What we see is the second generation. It's not only to have a statistical data, but have administrative registration data. What do I mean by this? in Costa Rica, and that's a great possibility, we have unique registration number for voting. There's a unique number that's associated to each and every citizen. So there's traceability to our information, our public information. We have a very robust system in healthcare that collects monthly information for many or most of the citizens. That you see there is that we have a census of almost 88.7% of the population when you gather together the public information, the public registrations. One disclaimer, this is very sensitive information. Whenever you work with this, it's necessary to have all the appropriate protection of the private data of people. But then we have basically a living census for which you can apply as well multidimensional analysis. For what? To tackle directly poverty, not only by income, but by each of their dimensions. Please, the next one. This is an example of a social worker working directly with the family, and she's got in her hands an integral family plan. And what is this family plan? In the social programs, when you get to work with people, you work not only giving them cash transfer, but the integral plan works the different dimensions of the index. Education for the children of the family, training for the leaders of the household, improving the house quality, improving the access to health system, constant health checks for women, for example. So then you can start building not only addressing poverty, but building human capital. And that's changing people's life and the life of a country. Please, and this is the people that collect the data directly from the household. You have more than 1,000 workers in the health system that collect data, and more than 500 social workers. But this network to collect data of those households is all interconnected throughout the country. Next, please. We use a life cycle approach. This means, and this is one of the most exciting things. Let me give you just an example of what I just did last week with this data set, with this information. I request the guys working there, show me to the latest report how many pregnant women there are in Costa Rica. And they show me the information of the current pregnant women in Costa Rica. And with the data set, it was approximately 50,000. And then I say, okay, from that information, show me which of those women are in extreme poverty. And it was about 40%. And of poverty, 40%. Extreme poverty, 10%. From that 10%, show me which of those pregnant women are between the age of 15 and 19. And there were about 300 pregnant women. What does that mean? You can, and we know them by name and address. So you can address a specific public policy to those future citizens, which are going to be the most vulnerable. That means you can start building human capital even before the child has reached the earth. So that's the kind of thing. Please, the next one, because I know that the time is running. This is the kind of data sets you can then manage. On the left, or here on the right, you can see that's poverty and extreme poverty by district. So you can see which are the districts that have more incidence. But the next step now, because we've got the information, but it's more complex, we now can do this with this tool, yet only with income. But as we had to unify all the information to make it be a mirror to our multidimensional index, we have also all this information to be gathered and to be seen by dimension. So you have also this to be part of our multidimensional poverty index in real time with real information, not only statistical information, but kind of a census, a living census. So you can address and put budgets in whichever are the districts, depending on each dimension. And you can also start changing life of people. Go to the next one, please. You can see that in maps, so you can see where the incidence of a specific dimension is hurting the most. So you can target directly what kind of policy you need. So you can design and plan and work with local governments. And next one, please. But also, and this is one of the latest and most exciting, you can see the blue line there represent the people that are currently in some kind of program. You have first the people that are not poor, next the ones that are vulnerable, next the ones that are in basic poverty. This is still in income. And next one on extreme poverty. But what does that mean? That we know people in extreme poverty that are within programs, but the most important, we know all the households in extreme poverty that are not within a program. So those 37,000 people are our next step. We have identified them, we know where they are, and we have contacts or addresses or phone numbers. Now we need budget, but we can go directly to where the most poor and vulnerable people in Costa Rica are, but not only with cash transfer programs, but programs in the whole dimensions to build human capital. And this is a very exciting job. We started this in 2014, it's 2019, it's 5 years. Before that, we don't even knew what our poverty index was. In 5 years, we can have that clarity. And this is thanks of the work we've done, but specifically the work done with OPHI, with Sabina, her team, and a great team around the world, and a great network around the world. So if of any help is, so you can see how excited I am about this, but also to get you excited about it, because this changes lives. Just a bit and small one. A couple of months ago, I saw a woman that was within a multidimensional program. 2 years before, she was in extreme poverty, no income, single mom. But through the programs, she not only had the training, the child care, and the scholarships that helped her household, but with the training, she started her own small business. Why? Because it was addressed multidimensionally, but she was empowered and was part of it. And her life changed. Now she's an entrepreneur. So it's very exciting what we can do and what can happen in the next couple of years and months with these kinds of tools. And I thank you all for being here, because I know you are also excited as I am in this matter, and also our thanks. Siempre agradecido, Sabina, with you and with Office. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. President Carlos Alvarado talked about the possibility that each indicator you can address with public policy. You can budget for each dimension. And he showed that in all of the different slides, but he also showed how you can use the MPI to pinpoint the 300 girls 15 to 19 who are pregnant, and the next generation of 37,000 people to target. And so what you see, this event is on a call to action, but it needs leadership, and it needs the kind of articulate, informed, but also political leadership that we see in Costa Rica. It's an honor, truly, to work with you. And I now call upon the Prime Minister of Curaçao, Eugene Rhuggenaath, to deliver his remarks. Prime Minister.
Thank you, Sabina. Good morning. First of all, I'd like to thank you for inviting me to participate in this very important event, something that is very close to my heart. And drawing on President Alvarado's remarks, it is clear that addressing poverty from a multidimensional approach is essential. And I can share with you that I was very privileged to visit Costa Rica in 2017, where I received some education in this matter. And we are privileged today because, as the President said, he's actually done the work. Congratulations. Now, although Curaçao is considered a Caribbean island with a relatively high level of income per capita, income is sharply on decline, and as we all know in this room, income per capita is an indicator that actually hides poverty. Our biggest challenge is that we are in a deep economic recession, and my government is working tirelessly to address the social ills and growing unemployment, which now has reached the levels of 21%. Until 2018, MPI Curaçao only used the economic metric for determining poverty. So for us, it was also hidden, people living in poverty. Last year, we developed a preliminary national MPI for Curaçao, and our national MPI results demonstrated that 6.4% of the population is multidimensionally poor, 28.2% is vulnerable to multidimensional poverty. The elderly comprise a large group within the extreme poor, and also single parents with 2 or more children. And the quality of work and education are the most important indicators for us. And it also reveals, for example, talking about policy, that rigid labor laws actually form a barrier for the poor to enter the labor market. In 2018, Curaçao also collaborated with the UNDP, Latin American Caribbean, to apply the poverty risk tool to determine how and why households transition out, but also more importantly, transition back into poverty. The findings of the poverty risk tool were in agreement with the indicators measured by the Multidimensional Poverty Index, the MPI. And to complement our work by including the voices and the insights of the poor, we conducted a multidimensional poverty survey in a neighborhood prior to delivery family-focused interventions in a pilot. And it was very interesting to hear that Costa Rica is also working with an integrated family plan, which is the approach that we want to apply in our neighborhoods. That pilot program will now be expanded into a broader social development agenda for the next 2 years, including family assistance and coaching and workforce development. And this is all based on the application of the Multidimensional Poverty Index. Following the implementation of both of these measures, I can attest to their usefulness in gaining crucial insight, which has supported my government to come up with evidence-based interventions for our social development agenda. We will continue to work to further institutionalize the MPI as an instrument, and this in cooperation is essential. The countries of the Global South, and particularly SIDS, Small Island Development States, mine included, require the MPI to measure poverty and inform our decisions. And this is very important because what we realize is that we have had programs working with NGOs, funding NGOs, working in all areas, but we could not measure the impacts on improving people's lives. With the MPI, we can better measure our progress towards achieving Sustainable Development Goal, SDG number 1. I firmly believe that it's through South-South collaboration that we can best institutionalize the use of this tool and more adequately address poverty in all its forms. On that note, I welcome the efforts of the Seychelles, which hosted the 2019 annual MPPN meeting and stressed the need for the focus on SIDS, developing national MPIs. While several SIDS are middle-income countries, it is clear that the way that SIDS experience poverty is often relative and very different in the way that it's experienced by larger countries. National MPIs help us to see and effectively manage our different definitions of poverty. Curaçao looks forward to setting forth this collaboration and addressing the multidimensional poverty to collaboration, as poverty, as you all know, no matter where it is experienced, similarly, and the challenges it poses to our society transcends borders, and so should our solutions. And so, being a small island, Curaçao, in any case, can attest of the importance of the MPI. We responded to the call to action and look forward to collaborate with you for the good of our people. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. The Honorable Prime Minister shared how Curaçao is in the process of designing their MPI, but also said something interesting, that small island developing states require an MPI. And it's very exciting for us at OPHI to learn how distinctive the nature of poverty is and how this measure could be of service there. I now am delighted to call on Barry Faure to deliver a message from the President of Seychelles.
President Alvarado, Prime Minister Eugene, Rhuggenaath, Thanks, I'll start again. President Carlos Alvarado, Prime Minister Eugene Rhuggenaath, Sabina, Alkire, and Mr. Lopez, Calva, ministers, all protocol observed. It is a privilege to be here today on behalf of the President of the Republic of Seychelles, Mr. Danny Faure, to address a group dedicated to monitoring and alleviating poverty in all its dimensions. Seychelles launched its pilot national multidimensional poverty indices on the 1st of July this year, becoming the second high-income country in the world after Chile to use the MPIs. We found that a multidimensional measure far better reflects the distinctive characteristics of poverty in our islands. It allows us to analyze the pockets of poverty that exist in Seychelles so that we can target interventions accordingly. Later this year, the MPIs will become an official statistic of the government to inform policymaking, monitor progress in eradicating poverty, and be reported against Goal 1 of the SDGs. The global MPI can play a critical role in ensuring no one is left behind. This is a people-centered index that reflects poverty as poor people often describe it and captures the multiple deprivations the less fortunate face at the same time. In July this year, Seychelles hosted the annual meeting of the 58-country Multidimensional Poverty Peer Network, where we discussed how MPIs can accelerate progress towards SDG goal number 1, no poverty. As a community, we agreed to advocate for several critical points. Firstly, although many countries have or are building MPIs, as yet no country can report their SDG indicators in the global database. So, since 2015, even countries that update their MPI annually, such as Colombia, have not been permitted to upload their MPI into the global database. We urgently request UN Statistics Division to address this matter urgently, and also request the UNDP to consider being the custodian agency so that countries are able to report on this important issue. The second point is that there is a need for a high-profile, cross-cutting indicator of global poverty to complement the $1.90 per day measure in SDG reporting. We propose that the global MPI be included as an indicator in SDG 1 to track global trends in non-monetary poverty. It seems odd that while the SDGs address poverty in all its forms and dimensions, there is no indicator of multidimensional poverty alongside the $1.90 per day measure. We are pleased to note that the Global Sustainable Development Report, as President Alvarado mentioned, uses the global MPI that UNDP and OPHI compute for this purpose. We call on this to be included in the Secretary General's report each year on Goal 1 so that we can see how multidimensional poverty is changing at a global scale and celebrate our success in 2030. Measuring poverty using a unidimensional approach of GDP per capita does not give any society a complete picture. It is for this reason why I am encouraging, that is the President of Seychelles is encouraging, the development of a national MPI in every country with the active support of the University of Oxford's OPHI. Whether moral, financial, or lack of appropriate housing, poverty should not be tolerated in any healthy and democratic society. We have to find ways to mitigate against all forms of poverty. And it is for this reason that Seychelles is striving to alleviate poverty using the MPI as a key strategy. We will continue to ensure that MPI becomes institutionalized in Seychelles and acts as a compass, directing us towards an inclusive and prosperous Seychelles. Thank you.
We are very grateful for these remarks from President Faure. He mentioned the Global Sustainable Development Report in 2019, The Future Now, a Science for Achieving the Sustainable Development. And in this report, they advocate measuring poverty in multidimensional ways based on a country's levels, understanding and use of these measures to shape policy and promote coordination. So we are grateful for the Global Sustainable Development Report profiling this issue and also profiling the global MPI of which the President spoke in those remarks. No institution has done more for the visibility and credibility of multidimensional metrics than the United Nations Development Programme. UNDP with OPHI publishes the global MPI that was just mentioned, and I am delighted to welcome Luis Felipe Lopez Calva to deliver remarks on behalf of UNDP Administrator Achim Steiner. Luis Felipe.
Thank you very much, His Excellency Carlos Alvarado, President of Costa Rica, His Excellency Eugene Rhuggenaath, Prime Minister of Curaçao, President Faure, ministers, delegates, colleagues and friends. Thank you very much first to the government of Costa Rica for the possibility to be part of this very distinguished panel, and also to OPHI, a great partner throughout the years. We are at the 4-year mark of the adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And the signing of this agenda, as we see it in UNDP, is a politically salient moment which represents also the culmination of an intellectual journey over the past half-century. In order to make the 2030 Agenda possible, two parts of the intellectual evolution needed to converge. First, the way we think and conceptualize development, and second, the way we measure progress. We learned that growth is uneven and volatile, and that well-being goes well beyond income. We recognized that while income is a necessary condition, it is by no means a sufficient one to secure well-being. We agreed that a monetary measure of poverty is not enough, and we needed to understand also the depth, persistence, and complexity of poverty. UNDP has always been and continues to be at the forefront of these shifts in the development thinking and measurement. After a journey that UNDP supported since the beginning of this century, and in very close partnership with Sabina Alcar, James Foster, and other important intellectuals, we achieved the first publication of the Global Multidimensional Poverty Index 10 years ago. While this index was originally received with trepidation from the development community, almost a decade later, we can be certain that the thinking of development actors has converged towards this multidimensional approach. We have witnessed how the index has triggered rich discussions among policymakers and development practitioners around the world. Prior to that, UNDP was also the first to champion the reconceptualization of well-being beyond income with its publication of the Human Development Index in the 90s. With it, it solidified the notion that progress meant much more than economic growth. Arguably, the 2030 Agenda can be interpreted as the political consolidation of this different way to think about development. To conclude, let me make two additional points. First, the Multidimensional Poverty Index has helped us to improve our understanding of poverty in many countries, as the pioneering examples of Mexico and Colombia have shown. For example, the slide here shows the evolution of multidimensional poverty and monetary poverty in a group of selected countries, namely Peru, Pakistan, and Vietnam. Why have some countries moved at a slower rate in reducing multidimensional poverty than monetary poverty? That raises many important policy questions that forces us, as the President of Costa Rica just mentioned, to also think about policy in a different way. Take the case of Vietnam, for example, a country that has experienced significant reduction in income poverty in the last few years, but we can see that multidimensional poverty is very sticky. We conclude that we cannot monetize opportunities and capabilities. We have to go beyond that. Second, the Multidimensional Poverty Index is an instrument to enhance governance, acting as a policy coordination tool that encourages different sectors to align behind a common goal, as also the President has mentioned. Moreover, it fosters government accountability, and it allows progress to be widely scrutinized, lagging dimensions identified, and successes celebrated. Many countries around the world have embraced the multidimensional conceptualization and measurement of poverty, and we celebrate that. This is indeed one of the pillars of the thinking behind the SDG agenda. As we have done since the very beginning, UNDP reiterates its commitment to support the multidimensional approach to poverty and the MPI. And we will continue working with countries in every context to pursue social progress for all. Many thanks, and pura vida.
Thank you so much for an articulate and visionary statement spanning poverty, environment, growth, well-being, and showing that concepts really do matter. In fact, framing the SDGs as the political consolidation of the Human Development Framework, and the MPI, of course, is a tool for governance. We're very grateful for your leadership and support. I now turn to our ministerial discussion, and I welcome Teodoro Ribera, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Chile, to share his remarks and offer an important invitation to you.
Bueno, señor Presidente, Carlos Alvarado.
Mr. President Carlos Alvarado, Mr. Minister, delegates, those interested in a topic which is undoubtedly a great tool for Chilean social policy. In 2012, President Piñera created a commission to measure poverty. The issue of measuring poverty is a political issue. Many people don't want to measure poverty because while it is not measured, it cannot be used as a parameter to measure social programs. If one does not measure poverty, one does not have a parameter to measure whether what one does definitely impacts the measurement of poverty. And this commission, which is in charge of measuring poverty, recommended multidimensional poverty measurement as a complement of income to measure poverty. We said measuring income is not enough. We have to incorporate a multidimensional measurement. As a result of this recommendation, in 2014, the Ministry of Social Development and Family developed the first multi-dimensional poverty index following the methodology proposed by Alcari and Foster, so that the government, one could not say that the government had developed an index to suit its own purposes. It was the object of discussion and consensus with academia, with civil society organizations, and we tried to make it a tool that would have a lot of support from civil society and would therefore survive the succeeding governments. In Chile, we try to develop social policies that go beyond government administrations. And now we have a tool that nobody discusses. It is a tool for Chile, not for a single government. The MPI is one of the main indicators for diagnosing poverty in Chile. And thanks to the consensus that was developed with academia, and you know that academics are the ones who question social policies, it has become a valuable tool for identifying specific population groups, and not just groups, but to identify regions within the country that are excluded or are not supported in Chile's development process. Besides, the study that was conducted with this methodology has made it possible to develop a 2030 agenda with 17 sustainable development goals, a great tool that has to go hand in hand with social policies and generate medium and long-term goals. If we don't have medium and long-term goals, normally social policies become an electoral policy, and electoral policies last until the day of the elections. So, a methodology was developed, consensus was reached regarding this methodology. It was implemented, and we were able to develop a 2030 agenda that is shared by political parties in government and in the opposition. Chile does not only measure multidimensional poverty, it also uses the official MPI to build social policies. What I wish to stress is that it doesn't make sense to measure poverty. It is important to mention poverty, but that is not the end. The end is to make poverty go down, and not in a given situation, but permanently. It is possible. Has this methodology been useful? I would like to say that it has been very useful. It has been useful because it has helped us, one, to improve our social policies. Chile has, or had in 2000, a per capita of purchasing power of $10,000, $9,700. Nowadays, our purchasing per capita is close to $20,000. And when we see that a country went from $10,000 and 18 years later to $26,000, we might argue that there is no poverty. But poverty is focused in certain regions, in certain groups. It is hidden, but it's still there. There is a new poverty in many countries that results from the aging of the population. The aging of the population leads to very decent poverty, but poverty after all. When the husband and wife used to work, they used to have a certain living standard. And when one of them dies, or because they stopped working and retired, their income drops, and these are people who live in good houses with very considerable poverty. We have realized that poverty changed in the country. It is another type of poverty. What is poverty? If we measure current poverty in Chile by income, it is 20.6%. But when we use multidimensional measurements, we get 20.7%. It's a big difference, and that is why my advice is first to reach consensus about measurement tools, because when a government makes a measurement that results in 8.6%, and then a second measurement with other parameters, and poverty is 20.7%, policies have been adopted by consensus or in the collective imagination, people will reach the conclusion that poverty is not the result of different measurement, but it is the fault of the incumbent government. So I wish to point out that this is a very valuable tool. We hope to see you on July 20th to continue discussing it, and that Chile can further strengthen this tool. Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias, Ministro. We are very grateful to hear Chile's innovative role in the MPI. A couple of very important points: that measurement is not the aim, that reducing poverty is, but that measures can be tools, even in high-income countries, to show the hidden aspects of poverty. And he mentioned, for example, aging, or, for example, regions that are not monetary poor, but are multidimensionally poor. I'd also like to recognize that Chile will be hosting the next annual conference of the MPPN from the 22nd to 24th of June in 2019 in Santiago. Sorry, 2020. We are very grateful to South Africa, which has been a long-term steering committee member of this South-South network. We have in our midst also Pali Lahola, former Statistician General, the current Statistician General, Rhuggenaath, and we are delighted to welcome Minister Jackson Mthembu, the Minister in the Presidency of South Africa. Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you, Savina and OPHI, for inviting us to be part of this important event. His Excellency, the President of Costa Rica, His Excellency, the President of Seychelles, and His Excellency, the Prime Minister of Curaçao, and fellow ministers gathered here. It is indeed an honor for us to be addressing you this morning. I bring you greetings from the people of the Republic of South Africa. In July this year, we presented to the high-level political forum of the United Nations our voluntary national review, VNR, on progress regarding our implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. It therefore gives me great pleasure that we are this morning launching our SDG country report. I hope you have it with you. Which we will be depositing to the 74th session of the United Nations General Assembly. This report is a product of collaboration and cooperation between government, business, organized labor, academia, and civil society. Against the backdrop of our inhuman apartheid history, the country report provides us with a reminder not only of our successes, but more so of the challenges we are faced with. It is for this reason that, as the government of South Africa, we commit to working together with our social partners to eliminate poverty, create jobs and employment opportunities for our people, and to create a more equitable society. Statistics South Africa, as indicated by Savina, which is our official statistics body for the country, has in recent years undertaken substantial work to broaden our understanding of poverty in the country. In conjunction with various money metric measures that we regularly report, we have also developed a census-based multidimensional poverty index, which we call South Africa Multidimensional Poverty Index, SAMPI. Employing the Alkire-Foster method, again, we appreciate that Mr. Alkire is here with, Mr. Foster is here with us. This index enables us to track changes in levels of poverty over time. It also gives us evidence as to which indicators contribute most to poverty, so that policy matches need. Using our census gives us a razor-sharp picture of poverty, showing how many people are poor and what deprivations they have in order for our response to be swift and informed. Upon completion of our National Census 2021, we will be updating SAMPI to track multidimensional poverty trends in South Africa and offer all actors across government and civil society a new crystal clear picture of where we are and what needs to be done next. South Africa is seriously considering bringing the South Africa Multidimensional Poverty Index as a complementary measure of poverty. This becomes more imperative with the social wage that our country invests in cushioning our citizenry from poverty and hunger. Our government provides financial grants to the elderly, as well as to indigent children up to the age of 18. Indigent households benefit from a host of services, such as free education for their children, free water, free electricity, and refuse removal, solid waste management, and healthcare. An increase in the beneficiaries for grants has been correlated with a downward trend in the vulnerability to hunger at personal and household levels. We argue that as South Africa, we must use the multidimensional poverty index together with the money metrics as an additional measure by our government to fight poverty. Using these combined tools enables us to gain a better picture of the impact of our policies on the reduction of poverty. As a long-time steering committee member of the Multidimensional Poverty Peer Network, MPPN, South Africa, together with our partners in the MPPN, share and interrogate our work on fighting poverty in all its dimensions. By each sharing what we do best, we learn from one another about the complexities of fighting the scourge of poverty and the inherent challenges of inequality and hunger that comes with it. Established less than a decade ago, the MPPN is a very important structure in the world's efforts to fight poverty and hunger. We have therefore, as a country, hosted its meetings in 2018. This meeting was again hosted on our MPPN meeting was again hosted on our continent by the Seychelles in July this year. As I conclude, South Africa remains fully committed to the full implementation of all the Sustainable Development Goals, Agenda 2030. We believe that as a people, enjoined by our common desire to eradicate poverty and inequality, we must work with other nations of the world to attain a society which is non-racial, non-sexist, democratic, and prosperous for all our nations. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Minister, for launching your SDG report, for calling on all of us to work on non-racist, non-sexist approaches to this work, and for profiling SAMPI, using census data to give a razor-sharp picture of poverty. We look forward to how your considerations unfold. We now move to Bhutan, the land of the Thunder Dragon, a pioneering country in many topics, which launched its MPI back in 2010. And I am very honored to welcome its Minister of Foreign Affairs, Tandi Dorji, to deliver his remarks. Dasho.
Thank you, Sabina. His Excellency, the President of Costa Rica, His Excellency, the Prime Minister of Curaçao, eminent speakers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I would like to thank the Honorable President of Costa Rica, His Excellency Carlos Alvarado, and Dr. Sabina, and her hard-working team at the Multidimensional Poverty Peer Network for organizing this important discourse here at the United Nations. And I'm very happy to be here this morning. As many of you already know, we are in Bhutan guided by our development philosophy of gross national happiness to reduce poverty and inequality, which is one of the biggest priorities of the government. And to meet this target, the government has continued to identify those who are the most vulnerable for broad-based social investments to implement specific policy measures. Bhutan was the second country to officially launch the Multidimensional Poverty Index in 2010 and the first to fully use the Alkaya-Foster method. Since then, both monetary and multidimensional poverty has reduced drastically. Our MPI, which is similar to the global MPI, but uses other indicators such as for roads, land, and livestock, and food security instead of nutrition. In the last 6 years, our MPI declined from 12.7 in 2012 to 5.8 in 2017. And this is largely due to the wise commitment of the royal government over the past decades, which have been further guided by the visions of our monarchs. Bhutan provides free healthcare, free education, extensive infrastructure development, and fast economic growth. We also use the MPI for targeted interventions and also for allocating our scarce resources using what we call as the resource allocation formula for local governments. That is, we provide more money for those which are considered with a higher MPI. Against this backdrop, there are 2 points to contribute to this call on action. First is we, like Mexico and Colombia, and other first generation of MPI adopters, are ready to complement our original MPI that reflects acute poverty with a moderate MPI. For example, if those who attain the 10th standard fail to acquire jobs, then we offer free education. And in recent times, we have raised that level so that all class 10 students can finish up to the 12th standard. Similarly, we have now increased the salaries, and the teachers are the highest paid civil servants. And in that way, the quality of our education improves. Both the Prime Minister and myself being doctors, as you might guess, the health standards are rising. A moderate MPI will therefore monitor these deeper aspirations of our people. Second, Bhutan has a very holistic approach and a holistic perspective because of our concept of the gross national happiness, or GNH. Since 2008, our GNH index has used the MPI methodology and its tools. Yet, poverty and well-being and GNH are not the same. When we add to the MPI dimensions of culture, community, environment, governance, time use, and psychological well-being, we see more. And we see this trend gaining traction among our friends. So I propose a call to action on well-being as the Human Development Reports of the UN reach 30 years and the SDGs reach 5 years. Can we seriously explore measures of well-being that include and extend beyond MPI? Using our GNH index, we can see person by person who lacks the conditions for well-being and how we can improve those. We also call for action to learn together those policies that address subtler aspects of well-being, like social isolation or anxiety, or the delicate yet profound topic of spirituality. In an era of rising inequality, let us firmly commit to both ending poverty in all its forms for everyone and expanding well-being in all its forms for everyone. Thank you. Tashtilil.
Kadinchela, we are very, very grateful for Bhutan's discourse, speaking of its lightning fast reduction of MPI. and yet also issuing a profound call to action to think about poverty measures and how well-being could complement them and draw our attention to subtler aspects of deprivation. And so we look forward to hearing as others respond to and address these topics. Our next speaker is from Bangladesh, a long-standing country with long-term visions and mechanisms for thinking about poverty in all its dimensions. And we are deeply grateful to welcome Dr. Shamsul to address us.
Thank you, Sabina. Mr. Chair, please know all protocols observed, including you. Estimation of multidimensional poverty in attaining Sustainable Development Goal 1, we recognize that eradicating poverty in all its forms and dimensions, including extreme poverty, is the greatest global challenge and an indispensable requirement for sustainable development. Government of Bangladesh recognizes the multidimensional nature of poverty and the need to address the problem by adopting appropriate policies and strategies. To operationalize the estimation of multidimensional poverty, we estimated child multidimensional poverty index first. Children, why we have taken children first? Children make up 46% of the poor in Bangladesh and are more susceptible to abuse, exploitation, and natural disaster. Children are poorer than adults. Many additional issues linger in terms of malnutrition, poverty, and low or lack of education. And in estimating child poverty, we used multiple indicator cluster surveys conducted by our National Bureau of Statistics. So we used the database of 2012-13, including 43,145 households, where we had 94,440 children. So purpose was to create a national child-focused MPI in Bangladesh, and we did that. So we covered 4 dimensions: child environment, living standard, reflecting living standard, child survival, health and nutrition, child protection, child development, covering education. And in child environment, we had indicators like drinking water, sanitation, hand washing, electricity, clean energy and cooking fuel, housing material, walls, roof, etc. Child environment, child development, education, 2 indicators: school attendance, years of schooling, and child survival, health and nutrition. Indicators are stunting, wasted, child mortality, and child protection covered child marriage, violence against children, birth registration. So we had 12 indicators: electricity, sanitation, drinking water, and we decided cutoff for each indicator and put weight for each indicator. So indicators are electricity, sanitation, drinking water, floor, cooking fuel, school attendance, years of schooling, malnutrition, child mortality, and child marriage, child violence, and birth registration under 4 dimensions, 12 indicators. So what we found? We found national poverty level for children is 27%, where population poverty in our country is 21.8%. So it is a bit higher when we estimated child poverty. So by indicators, which indicator contributed how much in poverty, we have shown in a pie chart. It's not seen in the, pie chart. Contribution each indicator in the poverty by percentage under 4 dimensions. It is shown here. And by districts, we have shown which districts actually have more poverty, more intensity. So deeper color, more poor. So lighter color, less poor, like that. So we'll release our child poverty report in January 2020, completing everything, discussion, consultation. And then on, we'll go with process of estimation of MPI by 2020. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alam, for profiling child poverty. That's so vital focus of different MPIs in different countries in different ways, and also for the plans to do a national MPI, for reminding us all of how this is embedded in the SDG framework, and also mentioning this in the voluntary national review of Bangladesh. We look forward to the launches. I'm now delighted to turn to Her Excellency Sania Nishtar, who has taken up the mantle to lead Pakistan's work on poverty alleviation and social protection. We look forward to your remarks.
Your Excellency, President of Costa Rica, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. The government of Pakistan wishes to thank the President of Costa Rica and Sabina Al-Khair for their leadership in this area. We believe the Multidimensional Poverty Index is highly relevant to the SDGs related measurements. I'm pleased to report that both MPI and the SDGs feature prominently in Pakistan's recently launched umbrella initiative, EHSAS, which aims to address poverty and inequality. 11 out of the 17 SDG goals are firmly embedded in the EHSAS framework, particularly Goal 1 on poverty, Goal 2 on hunger, Goal 3 related to health, Goal 4 on quality education, Goal 8 related to work, Goal 9 centered on innovation, Goal 13 with regard to climate change, and in particular, SDG 10 focused on reducing inequality, and the partnership-centered Goal 17. In terms of the metrics, we have used both consumption-based estimates as indicators of monetary poverty, as well as the MPI as a measure of non-monetary deprivations to establish baselines for the EHSAS initiative. We note that MPI reporting has been stipulated in SDG 1.2.2, and I'm pleased to convey that as a member of the Multidimensional Poverty Peer Network, Pakistan will report its MPI metrics as soon as the UN opens the relevant portal. I believe this is scheduled for October the 22nd this year. More broadly, under the EHSAS framework, 4 important data ecosystem-related measures are being taken. I will quickly summarize those. Firstly, EHSAS stipulates that local poverty alleviation solutions must be guided by evidence related to the drivers of poverty. We are therefore commissioning studies in this regard and are committed to data disaggregation by gender, by income quintiles, and on geographic basis, which we believe is the first step to understand the local drivers of poverty. Our new nationally representative social and living standards measurement survey for 2019 is in the field, and it is powered for such disaggregation. And we will use these data for the new MPI figures, which we hope to release by middle of next year. Secondly, within the EHSAS framework, there is an emphasis on data and evidence-informed decision-making. To facilitate this, EHSAS will soon be deploying a spatially interactive district development portal, the first initiative of its kind in the country, which will allow the user to explore the relationship between poverty at the district level against 50 plus additional development and policy indicators, including those that are key for measuring success on the SDGs. The indicator set currently includes all available indicators for health, education, child stunting, access to key services such as water, sanitation, and electricity, and a range of employment statistics. These data will be available over time, allowing the user to easily track status. Third, the EHSAS framework includes the National Strategy for the Development of Statistics to strengthen quality and availability of statistics by the Pakistan Bureau of Statistics. We would like to ensure the independence of statistics so that the government can have access to a credible and reliable base of evidence, which we believe is critical to support the design and evaluation of policies. And fourth, in order to identify the poor precisely and to make government subsidies targeted, we are updating our National Socioeconomic Registry. The 2019 version, which is a national door-to-door census, will be deployed by mid-2020. We are already working on a policy to make the registry live and responsive over time. We believe data and evidence are crucial for decision-making in SRs because the SRs framework is aimed at those who are most in the need for help. The extreme chronic poor, those who suffer catastrophic risks, orphans, widows, the homeless, the disabled, the jobless, poor farmers, laborers, the sick who risk impoverishment, the undernourished, students from low-income backgrounds, and poor women and elderly citizens. We believe SRs is unique, and I say this with humility because it is the most ambitious poverty-centered umbrella initiative the Pakistan government has ever undertaken with its 134 policies and program elements. It is both multi-sectoral as well as multi-stakeholder based, and because it is embedded in theory of change, which is reflected in its 4 pillars, which are action against elite capture, safety nets, livelihoods and jobs, and human capital formation. In terms of its goals, SRs aims to create safety nets for at least 10 million families in Pakistan, livelihood opportunities for 3.8 million people, financial access to healthcare for 10 million families, scholarships, education incentives for 5 million students, 50% of them girls, and financial and digital inclusion for 7 million individuals, 90% of these are women. The SR strategy has been released 10 days ago and can be accessed on our website. We invite all of you to comment on this framework, and we look forward to our collaboration with the network to share lessons and to learn from all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for such a wonderful, compact presentation of a whole system ranging from the SAS program to data, evidence, different surveys, different indicators and ways into the poverty program. And we are delighted also by your voice and your evident energy to funnel attention to the long-standing deprivations of poverty and disempowerment in Pakistan. We hope your work bears fruit. We now are truly delighted to welcome Her Excellency Ghada Wali, Minister of Social Solidarity in the Arab Republic of Egypt. You have the floor.
Thank you, Sabina. Good morning, everyone. Your Excellency Carlos Alvarado, President of Costa Rica, distinguished panelists and speakers, ladies and gentlemen, my sincere thanks for inviting me to this session. It is definitely a great pleasure to be amongst this distinguished panel to discuss the multidimensional poverty indices and their great significance for advancing SDGs, for steering and organizing efforts to reduce deprivation in our countries. I do congratulate Sabina for her commitment and for the real serious work that has been taking place over the last 3 years, the commitment that we witness every time we come and meet and discuss the different programs and the different challenges in our countries. On another note, Latin American countries were a real guide to us to launch and implement our conditional cash transfer program in early 2015. And it is the database of this program that has almost 30 million Egyptians that has allowed us to move and take the extra step of addressing multidimensional poverty, because in this database we have collected statistics that allowed us to know every aspect of the families, every aspect at the village level, every aspect in the poverty, the profile of poverty of every family in the database. The Multidimensional Poverty Index as a sound methodology to help track progress towards the achievement of SDGs in general, and for combating poverty and ultimately monitoring how the different dimensions are interlinked to accelerate progress across the 17 goals of the SDGs. Actually, we find it very useful to allow global analysis as well, not just compare within the country, but also compare between different countries. The desegregation of data is vital for the equitable analysis of multidimensional poverty. The importance of using the MPI to compare different countries and compare within the same country and within the same region in the country is very useful to us. However, and as the minister from Chile has mentioned, we still have this political challenge of agreeing on what are the indicators and how often should we measure and how should we measure that. In the Ministry of Social Solidarity, we have been collecting the data, we have been analyzing the data, and we have been able to identify the needs. And we have been relating this to the MPI. I still believe that we still need a lot of capacity building within countries and between countries, and a lot of sharing information and tools so that we can make this an accessible, user-friendly tool that different countries can use and exchange notes. I find the network very useful, and I congratulate you on the work that is being done on the network. However, we still think that we still need extra work when it comes to capacity building on the ground in different countries. Investing in capacity building is very important, and in developing policy tools and publishing policy notes, because as you have said, Sabina, measurement is not the goal in and of itself. Because of the collected information we have collected in the database that was done for conditional cash transfer, there was an initiative launched focusing on the poorest 1,000 villages. And in those poorest 1,000 villages, we are going to address the different aspects of poverty. These are the villages where there is no infrastructure for sanitation, where there is no connectivity to potable water, where access to electricity is limited. So within those identified as the poorest villages, there is this program called Dignified Life that the Presidency has launched, and where we are going to pool together all the resources, the financial resources, the investments of both the government, the private sector, the NGOs are all encouraged, and for them to work together in a coordinated and concerted manner. We have developed maps with the details of the needs of the population and steering committees at the regional level to look at the needs of the different regions and at the different villages. Most important element in this initiative is the voice of the people. We collect and listen to the people in the villages, to groups in the villages, and we listen to their needs. It is very interesting how you can relate the elements and the indicators of the MPI to what people really think is important and is of relevance to them, which makes it a true good governance tool, not just a measurement tool, not just a policy tool, but it's a good governance tool because there is this element of partnership and this element of participation of the people. Actually, we have been noting that in the villages, the big households with many children have higher poverty scores. So we need to work on a reproductive health and spacing programs and address the population program. Low wages and growing informal sector is another challenge, and it is very much related to decent employment and inequality when it comes to men and women in access to jobs. All these are elements that we were able to find out by collecting data from the field, feeding in this data into the system, and analyzing this data. I do congratulate the different countries who have published their reports. We are working on this multidimensional MPI with great enthusiasm, with great interest in making it a national tool for Egypt. We are, however, still at the level of building the capacity and coordinating with the ministries of planning, the ministries of finance, because this is not the job of one ministry. It has to be a consensus at the political level, at the highest level, and it has to be also, there has to be communication and understanding for the people and the villages level of what are we measuring, why are we measuring it, and what to expect, so that not to raise expectations and people think that with this tool and with these interventions, all poverty issues will be solved. Once again, I thank you, Sabina, I thank Oxford University, and I thank you for the commitment, and we are very happy to continue working with all of you on this very important development in measuring poverty. Thank you.
Thank you again for a substantive and wonderfully rich set of remarks which drew our attention to the need for capacity building. We do have policy briefings and we have a magazine with interviews, but we really welcome more suggestions and hard questions because we don't have all the answers. And the purpose of a network is to ask the difficult questions and help each other solve them. And also I would like to celebrate her focus on the voices of the poor and listening and communicating at all levels of society from the highest to the people we serve. So thank you so much. We are now delighted to welcome Her Eminence Minister Hadia Sadia Omar Farouk from Nigeria. And also we recognize the presence with us of Niger State.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sabina. Let me start by apologizing for coming a little bit behind schedule. There was some VIP movement along the way. Your Excellencies, President of Costa Rica, President of Seychelles, Prime Minister of Curaçao, UNDP Administrator, fellow honorable ministers and panelists, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed an honor to join other strong voices to highlight the importance of multi-stakeholder engagement to achieve peace and security, poverty eradication, zero hunger, quality education, climate action, and inclusion, the theme of this year's UNGA, which are essential to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Agenda. And today we see at first-hand results of such collaborative efforts between the UNDP and the Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative in developing the multidimensional poverty indices and the subsequent setup of the Multidimensional Poverty Peer Network, the convener of this event, which Nigeria is a member. Permit me to convey the thoughts of His Excellency President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari, who is using his leadership to accelerate multi-sectoral efforts to eradicate extreme poverty, reduce inequality, and ensure social protection, inclusion, and social justice in Nigeria. In its first time in office between 2015 and 2019, the government successfully empowered more than 5 million people out of extreme poverty through its National Social Investment Program. Following this success, the President announced the plan to empower 100 million people out of poverty in the next 10 years. He declared that by the end of 8 years, we will have laid the grounds for lifting 100 million Nigerians out of poverty. This outcome will fundamentally shift Nigeria's trajectory and place among the world's great nations. This aspiration takes into cognizance the country's current estimated population of about 200 million people. And following this announcement, that is the 100 million out of poverty mandate kicked off with the establishment of a ministry to coordinate these multi-sectoral efforts. That is the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management, and Social Development. The ministry will collaborate with different government agencies, donor organizations, and private investors to shape policies and drive real impact in the following ways, among many. We have built a national unified social register in all the states in conjunction with the World Bank. And we have over 3.5 million poor households in our conditional cash transfer. With the support of the President, we use the MPI data to foster government accountability to citizens by indicator tracking of ministerial performance, that is accountability from ministers to the President. To also support and work closely with the National Bureau of Statistics to conduct regular multidimensional poverty measurements alongside monetary measures at both national and subnational levels to understand our true poverty status and use findings to continue shaping policies. In partnership with private sector and using social investments and the SDGs office, create a national and state poverty map tracker to provide a vivid representation of progress towards our end poverty goal. In collaboration with the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning, to use MPI data to improve budget allocations by sector and state with the aim of better targeting beneficiaries of the 100 million out of poverty mandate. To also facilitate a biannual multi-stakeholder, multi-sector national roundtable on the reduction of poverty and inequality. These strategies demand a multilateral approach where the three arms of government, executive, legislative, and the judiciary, work towards this common goal. achieving the SDG and specifically SDG 1, eradicating extreme poverty by 2030, also calls for regional and global efforts. You will agree with me that the road to SDG 2030 looks bright and promising given today's conversation. My optimism is premised on the assumption that when Nigeria extends its hands to support and request support in regards to this new mandate, the MPPN, UNDP donors, countries, regions, and the good people of the world will rise to the occasion and act in partnership as we jointly seek to end poverty and reduce inequality. Our destinies are linked, the goal is common, and time can't wait. Let us join hands together to make this happen. I thank you all for your attention.
Minister, what a rousing vision you shared of 100 million people leaving poverty in all its forms, and also the practicality of your plans and visions. So we really look forward to hearing how this progresses. Friends, we are now in a position where we still have 8 speakers, and we have 15 minutes. So we will go a little bit over time, but I would also request the speakers to be very punctual, and if possible, cut your remarks perhaps by a minute. It would really, really help. But I'm very delighted to call on Rosemary Edelon from the Philippines, who's a very experienced and articulate authority on MPI there. Rosemary.
Thank you very much, Excellencies, President of Costa Rica and Prime Minister of Curaçao, distinguished delegates, good morning. The Philippines recognizes well-being as encompassing multiple dimensions, and corollary to that, so does poverty. Filipinos in general aspire to enjoy strong family and community ties, a comfortable lifestyle, and a secure future. And so at the minimum, Filipinos need to have the sort of quality of life and functionings necessary to achieve these aspirations, which we summarily label as the Ambisyon Natin 2040. We fully subscribe to the ambition of Goal 1 of the SDGs, which calls for addressing poverty in all its forms and in all its dimensions. In an archipelago like the Philippines, where the more than 100 million people are scattered around almost 8,000 islands, then income poverty measure really masks the deprivations that are being experienced by the poor. Implicitly, income poverty assumes that everybody has equal access to the markets so that this income translates to quality of life. And of course, that is not the case. And this is where the MPI really comes in handy. The official set of the first official set of the MPI Philippines was released in November of 2018, and it covers 4 dimensions: education, health and nutrition, housing, water and sanitation, and employment. We have 13 indicators under these dimensions. Preliminary results show that in 2017, there were 17.3% of Filipinos who were multidimensionally poor or were deprived in at least 1/3 of the indicators. This is actually an improvement from the 23.9% in 2016. Digging deeper, we see that education has the largest contribution to the overall multidimensional poverty index. Incidence of deprivation in education stood at 59.3% in 2016, although it went down to 49.4% in 2017. Now, these initial results sent ripple effects into the public education sector, especially the officials in government in charge of education. At first, they suggested that only functional literacy should be included as the indicator. But because we are linking it to our Ambisyon Natin 2040, then we argued for a higher standard. And so that initial contention over the indicator was then replaced with concern over the deprivation. Consequently, there is now a call for greater budget allocation for our alternative learning system that targets school dropouts, many of whom are older than 18 years. We intend to fully utilize the MPI to inform policy and resource allocation. Our next MPI will be based on our family income and expenditure survey, and we hope to have them by the first quarter of next year. This will now allow us to estimate subnational indices and therefore a more granular approach to address poverty in all its dimensions. At the same time, we can now correlate it with income-based measures of poverty. As we pledge to leave no one behind, we have to get better at identifying where the poor have serious deprivations. Hence, we support the adoption and development of alternative poverty measures such as the MPI. Thank you once again to Sabina for this very relentless effort towards having this a better measure of poverty. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And I'm now delighted to call on Trudy Renwick, Assistant Division Chief from U.S. Census Bureau.
Good morning. Good morning. It's an honor to be included in this distinguished panel today. This has been a wonderful opportunity to learn about what our colleagues in other countries around the world have been doing in the area of multidimensional poverty and deprivation. I'm happy to report that last May, the U.S. Census Bureau published its first report on multidimensional deprivation. The report's author, Dr. Brian Glassman, is here with us today. Using data from our American Community Survey, the report looks at 6 dimensions: standard of living, education, health, economic security, housing quality, and neighborhood quality. The report found that 15.4% of the U.S. population in 2017 faced deprivation in at least 2 dimensions. The majority of these were also categorized as in poverty using our pre-tax unidimensional income poverty measure. But there was a considerable share of the population, 4.6%, who were not income poor but faced deprivations in at least 2 other areas. At the state level, there were 20 states and the District of Columbia where the MDI was higher than the official poverty rate. There were 16 states where the official poverty rate was higher and 14 where the differences were not statistically significant. Decomposing the MDI, we found that standard of living and housing quality contributed the most to the measure, particularly for children and working-age adults. Looking at race and ethnic origin, Blacks and Hispanics are overrepresented in their shares of multidimensionally deprived population relative to their shares of the overall population. Our research on this exciting new approach to measure deprivation will continue. Dr. Glassman is currently working on implementing a conceptually similar measure of multidimensional poverty in other U.S. household surveys, including the Current Population Survey, Annual Social and Economic Supplement, and the Survey of Income and Program Participation. Thank you very much for allowing us to join this panel today.
Thank you so much. And I have received notice that we have to finish sharply at 9:45. But it gives me a great satisfaction to call on the august Executive Secretary of ECLAC, or CEPAL, Alicia Bárcena, to share your reflections. Welcome. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Sabine, and thank you. I want to thank President Carlos Alvarado from Costa Rica and the Prime Minister of Curaçao for inviting us to this meeting. And we really are very pleased to be here. And I would like to reflect on 5 points. Number 1, ECLAC has been measuring poverty for the years, almost 25 years, and we do it based on household surveys and on basically on the basic, I would say, food basket and nutrition basket. And we have found that we measure monetary policy, though, and we do it through the Institutes of Statistics. And it has proved very useful in the sense that it gives you a comparative analysis of what's happening in the region. But definitely, monetary policy doesn't really give you the sense of the deprivation on housing, nutrition, and health, which is what the multidimensional index is bringing to the table, which is very important. Now, in our findings, we think that it's number 2, I guess, that we have to improve the metrics. Because the metrics, what's happening, and I think Eugene raised it very clearly, we have to make sure that we are very rigorous in the sense that as much as we can, because there's also a matter of sometimes you have to adapt to certain realities. But the metrics is very important so we can have a measure, a systemic measure, a periodical measure that brings you not only the sense of what's happening, like a picture of what's happening today, but that can give you the trends, how this is evolving. Why do we need this? And that's my third point, because if we improve the metrics, then we can have a policy design that can be better. Because monetary policy, the way we measure it, is income. We measure the income a household gets to buy things out. Okay. But multidimensional poverty is entering into another issue, which is public policy, cash transfers, public policy on housing, health, etc., which is not necessarily provided by income only. So we have to make sure that we distinguish these two when we formulate public policies. So and we can deal with, for example, problems like the whole life cycle. I think Minister Ribera touched upon this. We have to be clear that we are focusing on poverty on all the life cycles. And also, I believe that what we need is to make sure that we have this policy design. And we have, in our last social panorama, which we publish every year, and we do it every year, and it's a comparative analysis. And what we are aiming at is to understand what are the best public policies to combat poverty. And one of our findings is how much social expenditure is each government providing. For example, Costa Rica is 12.3% of GDP. The average of the region is 11% of GDP. Now, the interesting thing is how this public expenditure is being distributed. How do you allocate public expenditure? And our finding is that there are two sets of countries in our region, at least. One is the one that is providing public policies that are the most effective, let's say, when they invest in labor policies. For example, capacity building, training with enterprises to generate employment, which is really linked to income. And the second set of policies are social policies. And that's where, for example, Costa Rica has been very successful. Two examples: Uruguay, very successful on labor policies; Costa Rica, very successful on social policies. So to end, I would say that what we need, Sabina, and we are really ready to collaborate with OPHI and with UNDP, is to see how can we build an index in our region. I'm talking about Latin America and the Caribbean only, but that we can complement the monetary measurements that we are doing with a multidimensional view, but also that can be comparable. Because the problem today is that each country selects the dimension accordingly to their own realities, which is okay, but that's fine. But we also need a sort of looking at how the region is behaving and how it is improving or not. And my last point is that I want to invite you all. We're having our social conference next week, because what we are looking is how do we bring together two communities, the statistics community with the ministers of social development, to talk between each other. Next week we have a conference in Mexico with all the ministers of social development of the region, which they are asking UNDP and us to do two things. One is a new generation of public policies, which is beyond cash transfers, because cash transfer has already reached a point that it's not possible to advance more. You know, cash transfers in our region are costing 0.3% of GDP only. This is very low. Where is the social expenditure going? To social security, but not to the informal sector, to the formal. Anyway, but next week we're having this conference with the ministers of social development, that they are going to tell us what do they need, what measurements they need to be able to design the best public policies to bring to the heads of state. And secondly, we are going to have an observatory of public policies, which I think at the end of the day is what we are all aiming at. Thank you so much, Sabine.
Thank you so much. You've probably noticed that there's a flurry of activity up here. They would like us to close the event now, which is a bit early and quite a disappointment, because we have 5 more speakers. We have a speaker from the League of Arab States, a speaker from Swedish International Development Association, and from UNICEF, as well as from the government of Oaxaca and Horizonte Positivo in Costa Rica, which actually supported the development of the national MPI in Costa Rica. If you can do 20 seconds, and then I would ask the speakers to see our team. We'd like to video record your presentations and have them online. so that we can benefit from them. I do apologize for this change. You know the General Assembly is a very difficult time for many people here. But could I just have a very brief remark from each of the speakers, beginning with you?
Thank you, Sabina. Your Excellency.
Just 30 seconds would be very, very helpful. I'm so sorry. It's unexpected.
I will address my speech on behalf of His Excellency, the Secretary General of the League of Arab States, Mr. Ahmed Abul Ghait, and who is keen to participate on this meeting and to share with you the important experience of Arab region in using multidimensional poverty indicators within its effort to implement the ambitious 2030 agenda. I don't think I can speak more than this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we will post the Secretary General's speech from the League of Arab States on the website. Warm welcome to Karen Jamtian from SIDA.
Thank you, Sabina. And as things happen, we're all sorry, and I'll be happy to record a message. I would like to say that we're proud partners of OPHI, and that is because measuring poverty must be more than money. And to make it really short, I would like to quote President Alvarado as my last sentence, and that is what you said last. When you measure poverty solely by income, the responsibility to act is everybody's and nobody's. When we measure it in a multidimensional way, it's clear who has the responsibility. And maybe that's the most important sentence of this morning. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And the last remark from Vidya Ganesh of UNICEF.
Thank you. The best part of being last is everything has been said, and all I have to say is agree, and really thank you very much to the President of Costa Rica. You really set the stage and the emphasis on the paradigm shift. So all I want to say is thank you to Bangladesh to really put children at the center of it. There are the numbers are pretty staggering, and about 663 million children live in multidimensionally poor households, and 1/3 of them are under age of 5. So in terms of pinpointing where you want to use your measurement for policy programming, and lastly governance, I think we have a real task ahead of us, and we are very happy to collaborate with this peer-to-peer network. And I want to finally end with the point that Madam from Egypt made about the capacity building and translating the data into action. And we are very happy to support this peer-to-peer learning and network. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all the speakers, to President Alvarado, to all of the panelists for your insightful remarks. Let the energy from this exchange take us further. And we ask also to everybody to have our discussions outside this room. Amina Mohammed is leading an event here at 10. Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. This event is now closed.